Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is WireDogSec, back with another video for you guys. Today's video, we are inside of TryHackMe. This is Cybersecurity 101 Learning Path, Offensive Security Tooling module, and this is the SQLmap, the basics room. Learn about SQL injection and exploit this vulnerability through the SQLmap tool. Hopefully you're all ready to learn something today and having a good day today. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Task 1, Introduction. SQL injection is a prevalent vulnerability and has long been a hot topic in cybersecurity. To understand this vulnerability, we must first learn what a database is and how websites interact with a database. A database is a collection of data that can be stored, modified, and retrieved. It stores data from several applications in a structured format, making storage, modification, and retrieval easy and efficient. You can interact with several websites daily. The website contains some of the web pages where user input is required. For instance, a website with a login page asks you to enter your credentials, and once you enter them, it checks if the credentials are correct and logs you in if they are. As many users log in to that website, how does the website record all these users' data and verify it during the authentication process? This is all done with the help of a database. These websites have databases that store the user and other information and retrieve it when needed. So when you enter your credentials to a website's login page, the website interacts with its database to check if these credentials are correct. Similarly, if you have an input field to search for something, for instance, an input field of a bookshop website allows you to search for the available books for sale. When you search for any book, the website will interact with the database to fetch the record of that book and display it on the website. Now, we know that the website asks the database to retrieve, store, or modify any data. So how does this interaction take place? The databases are managed by database management systems, DBMS, such as MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQLite, or Microsoft SQL Server. These systems understand the structured query language, SQL, or SQL. So any application or website uses SQL queries when interacting with the database. And here is a graphic of that explanation here. This room will teach you the basics of SQL injection and how to use an automated tool to carry out SQL injection. It will also dive practically into the topic through a hands-on challenge. Learning objectives: SQL injection vulnerability, hunting SQL injection through the SQLmap tool. Reading prerequisites while having a solid SQL fundamentals knowledge is helpful. It is not required to complete this room. Answer the questions below. Which language builds the interaction between a website and its database? Well, we know that's going to be SQL or SQL, structured query language. Task number 2, SQL injection vulnerability. In the previous task, we studied how websites and applications interact with databases to store, modify, and retrieve their data in a structured manner. In this task, we will see how the interaction between an application and a database happens through SQL queries and how attackers can leverage these SQL queries to perform SQL injection attacks. Note: before we proceed, please ensure that you try the manual or automated SQL injection methods only after the permission of the application owner. Let's take an example of a login page that asks you to enter your username and password to log in. Let's provide it with the following data. So username is John, password is this here. Once you enter your username and password, the website will receive it, make a SQL query with your credentials, and send it to the database. So it'll look something like this, right on the back end. Select star from users, yada, yada, yada. This query will be executed in the database. As per this query, the database will check for a user named John and the password of this. If it finds such a user, it will return the user's details to the application. Note that the above query will be successful only if the given user and pass both have a match together in the database, as they are separated by the Boolean and. Sometimes when input is improperly sanitized, meaning that user's input is not validated, attackers can manipulate the input and write SQL queries that would get executed in the database and perform the attacker's desired actions. SQL injection has a very harmful effect in this digital world, as all organizations store their data, including their critical information, inside the databases, and successful SQL injection attack can compromise their critical data. Let's assume the website login page we discussed above lacks input validation and sanitization. This means that it is vulnerable to SQL injection. The attacker does not know the password of the user, John. They will type the following input in the given field. So username, John. Password is ABC, single quote, or 1 equals 1, semicolon, dash dash, space dash. This time, the attacker typed a random string, ABC, and injected string, which is the single quotes or 1 equals 1, yada, yada, yada. The SQL query that the website would send to the database will now become the following. So it's going to look like this on the back end. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on here. This statement looks similar to the previous SQL query, but now adds another condition with the operator or. This query will see if there's a user, John. Then it will check if John has the password ABC, which he could not have because the attacker entered a random password. Ideally, the query should fail here because it expects both username and password to be correct, as there is an AND operator between them. But this query has another condition, or between the password and a statement 1 equals 1. Any of them being true will make the whole SQL query successful. The password failed, so the query will check the next condition, which checks if 1 equals 1. As we know, 1 equals 1 is always true, so it will ignore the random password entered before this and consider the statement as true, which will successfully execute this query. The dash dash space dash at the end of the query would comment anything after 1 equals 1, which means the query would be successfully executed and the attacker would get logged in to John's user account. One of the important things to note here is the use of a single quote after ABC. Without this single quote, the whole string would be considered the password, which is not intended. However, if we add a single quote after ABC, the password will look like this, which encloses the original string ABC in the query and allows us to introduce a logical condition or 1 equals 1, which is always true. Awesome. Which Boolean operator checks if at least one side of the operator is true for the condition to be true? Well, that's going to be OR, as we just learned about. Is 1 equals 1 in a SQL query always true? Yes, as we just read about. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Be sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Once you subscribe, be sure to hit that notification bell. All right, so you know every time I post a new video. As you can see here, most people that view my videos, view my channel, are not subscribed. Now, if you do subscribe, it will help me get into the YouTube algorithm so that we can continue to grow our glorious community here. As always, thank you all for taking the time to watch. Have a nice day and enjoy the video. Task number 3, automated SQL injection tool. Carrying out an SQL injection attack involves discovering the SQL injection vulnerability inside the application and manipulating the database. However, manually doing all this can take time and effort. SQLmap is an automated tool for detecting and exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities in web applications. It simplifies the process of identifying these vulnerabilities. This tool is built into some Linux distributions, but you can easily install it if it's not. As this is a command line tool, you must open your Linux OS terminal to use it. The -help command with SQLmap will list all the available flags you can use. If you don't want to manually add the flags to each command, use the -wizard flag with SQLmap. When you use this flag, the tool will guide you through each step and ask questions to complete the scan, making this a perfect option for beginners. So if you want to try that, I already have terminal open. So if you do SQL map, you can do like that wizard. Okay. The --DBS flag helps you extract all the database names. Once you get to know the database names, you can extract information about the tables that database by using -D, database name dash tables. After obtaining the tables, if you want to enumerate the records in those tables, you can use the -D, database name -T, table name --dump. The different flags in the SQLmap tool will let you extract detailed information from the databases. Now let's take a practical scenario and use all the above flags to exploit a web application vulnerable to SQL injection. So the first step is to look for a possible vulnerable URL or request. You may often come across some URLs that use get parameters to retrieve the data. For example, a URL like the following here uses a parameter cat that takes the value 1, so you see cat equals 1. If you see any web application using get parameters in the URLs to retrieve data, you can test that URL with the -u flag in SQLmap tool. This is considered to be HTTP GET based testing. This approach is followed when the application uses get parameters in the URL to retrieve data from the searches. We will use a supposedly vulnerable website, SQLmap testing.thm, for the demonstration. Suppose that this website has a search option, and when you click on the search option and search for something, the URL comes this here, cat equals 1, search, yada, yada, yada. What uses the get parameter cat equals 1 in the URL to extract information from the database? As we know, URLs that have get parameters can be vulnerable to SQL injection. Let us scan this URL to identify if it has any SQL injection vulnerability. All right, so you can see here they're testing out that parameter here. It's going through doing its thing. Okay. Says the results in the above terminal show us that different types of SQL injection, such as Boolean-based blind, error-based, time-based blind, and union query, are identified in the target URL. These are different techniques for exploiting a SQL injection vulnerability. For example, in the Boolean-based blind SQL injection, the SQL query is modified in a Boolean expression that is always true. Example 1 equals 1 is included with the query to extract the information, whereas in error-based SQL injection, some queries are intentionally modified to generate errors in the results sent by the database. These errors often contain valuable information about the data. Similarly, other SQL injection techniques can be employed to exploit a database. The results from the command we executed from our target tell us that different types of SQL injection are possible on this URL. Let's use SQLmap's flags, which we studied earlier, to exploit them and extract some valuable data from the database. To fetch the databases, we use the flag --dbs. Let's try this out with our vulnerable URL. Right, so the new query would look like this: SQLmap-u, the URL, then --dbs to potentially find the database information. You can see here in this image here what they're talking about. This is after running the above command, we got two database names. Select the user's database and fetch the tables inside of it. We will define the database after the flag -u and then use the -tables flag at the end to extract all the database names. So you can see that here, available databases, users, members, and then tables. Take a look at the tables here, 3 tables. Now that we have all the available table names of the database, let's dump the records present in the Thomas table. To do this, we will define the database with the -d flag, the table with the -t flag, and for extracting the records on the table, we will use the --dump flag. You see that here. So it's targeting this Thomas table, and we're going to dump everything out of there. And this is the results here. So you have Thomas for the name, then you have the password there. However, unlike the URL used for testing above, you can also use post-based testing, where the application sends data in the request body instead of the URL. Examples of this could be login forms, registration forms, etc. To follow this approach, you must intercept a post request on the login or registration page and save as a text file. You can use the following command to input that request saved in the text file to the SQLmap tool. So we have SQLmap-R, which probably stands for request, and then the request inside of this text file here. Note, learning how to intercept and capture post requests is out of scope of this room, but you can do it with tools like proxy tools like Burp Suite, stuff like that. All right, answer the questions below. Which flag in the SQLmap tool is used to extract all databases available? Well, that's going to be --dbs, as we read about earlier. What would be the full command of the SQLmap for extracting all tables from the members database using this URL? Well, we can see it here. This is going to be the full command. All right. So we have the -d members, then --tables. Okay. So if you go back up here, you can see where they're talking about that. Dumping those tables right there. So there you go. And the next task is a practical exercise. In this task, we've tested a vulnerable web application for you to test SQL injection vulnerabilities. Start the virtual machine, press the start machine button, which I've already done. Start the attack box as well, which I've already done. Just the attack box will open for you in split screen or split view. You will use this machine to carry out SQL injection through the SQLmap tool. Note, it's highly recommended to use the attack box for this task. The web application has a login page that's hosted here. When you visit the URL, you will see a login page that's vulnerable to SQL injection. So I already have that pulled up, as you can see there. Okay. In the previous task, we saw that if we see get parameters in the URL, they might be vulnerable to SQL injection, and we can copy that URL to use it with SQLmap. We also saw that if there's a post request and the data is sent inside the body rather than the URL, we can intercept that request and use it with SQLmap to exploit a SQL injection vulnerability if there's any. However, in this task on the login page, we have used the get request, but the parameters of this request are not visible in the URL as they were on the previous task website. To test the URL with SQLmap, we need to have the URL along with the get parameters. So to get the complete URL along with its get parameters, we need to right click on the login page, click the inspection. So right click, inspect. This process may vary slightly from browser to browser. From here, we have to select the network tab. Then we have to enter some test credentials in the username. So flip over your network here and just do test at email.com and then test 123. Okay. And let's see here. So then we have to enter some test credentials in the username and password fields and click on the login button. And we will be able to see the get request. Click on that request and we will see the complete get request with the parameters. We can copy this complete URL and use it with the SQLmap tool to discover SQL injection vulnerabilities inside it and exploit it. The complete request is shown in the screenshots below, so should look like this down here. All right, so I guess we can go ahead and try this out since we already have something typed in here. Continue, there it is, right there. Yeah, so right here. Okay. So if you're unable to extract the URL by the above process, you can copy it below. All right, so we were able to see that. Run the commands as discussed in the previous task on the URL. Answer the questions given in the task. Also remember to include your URL inside these single quotes. This is to avoid errors with special characters in the terminal, such as question mark. An important note, you may not get the results by the simple scan. Add dash dash level equals 5 at the end of your commands to perform the in-depth scans. Secondly, while running the commands, the tool may ask you some questions. Make sure you respond to them as the following, as follows to run the scan smoothly. It looks like the backend DBMS is MySQL. Do you want to skip this test payloads for specific other yeah, skip test payloads specific for other DBMSs. Yes. For the remaining test, do you want to include all tests for MySQL extending provided risk 1 value? Yes. Injection not exploitable with null values. Do you want to try with a random integer value for the option dash dash union dash char? Yes. Get parameter email is vulnerable. Do you want to keep testing the others if any? No. Okay. So go ahead and try this out yourself, then answer these questions below. Then we'll come back to the video. Let's take a look at these questions. How many databases are available in this web applications? Well, you can see my query is built out here, SQL map -u URL -dbs to find information on the database, and then we needed to add this dash level equals 5 as stated in the instructions. So fire this off, go through, and it says available databases 6. So we have AI, information schema, MySQL performance schema, PHP and you have test. Okay. And it says, what is the name of the table available in the AI database? All right, so to do that, let's clear this out and then let's take a look here. So we want to grab the table information and we can do that with this dash D to target AI for the database and then dash dash tables parameter in there. So fire this off again and it says one table user. Okay, what is the password of the email test at chatai.com? All right, so once again, clear all this stuff out, and then let's take a look at my query here. Have it pulled up. All right, so once again, the database is going to be AI. That's the one we're targeting. Dash T for the user table, or the table, yeah, the table name user, and then dash dash dump. We want to dump the information out of there. So let's go ahead and add this in here. I don't think it matters if there's two dashes or one dash in here, but let's put two. And there we go. So if ID one, email test at chatai.com, created, and password 123456778. So that is that. Now you could also just dump everything in here, I believe. So if you want to do that, you can take a look at the instructions here or the help information here. So SQLmap help, and then you can do where you can do all kinds of stuff in there. So you can try to get shell access onto it, and here's everything. Retrieve everything. Dash dash all or dash a. There's dash dash dump all. Right. So if you wanted to do that, you can play around with it and test out some things in here. All right. So let's see here. If we wanted to dump everything, I believe we can just do it this way. Dump all. So dash dash, then dump dash all. So go through and dumps everything. Actually, you don't want to do that in the real world because these databases can be huge, and this could cause a huge disruption on the client's environment. But as you see, we're just playing around with it, and I suggest playing around with it as well. Get familiar with SQLmap because you may use this at some point in your career. But as usual, learn how SQL injection works. Try manual testing out first, and then try the automated stuff later on once you have a good grasp of manual testing. That's just my advice. But anyway, if you liked the video, like the information shared, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here with the notification bell so you know every time I post to the channel, upload a new video, all that good stuff. Comment below your thoughts and opinions on the information shared in the video. As always, thank you all for taking the time to watch my video. Have a nice day, and I will see you later.